Oris is sometimes a bit of an also-ran in the watch world, sometimes not loved quite as much as competitors such as Tudor. However, Oris has made some interesting watches. Case in point, the Divers 65, which is an affordable and solid entry. It's come in various different dial styles, various different colorways, and various different materials. But let's explore the one that I've got right here, which is nicknamed the Deauville. It's characterized by a two-tone grey and Deauville blue dial, which are coming in concentric circles, in addition to the yellow font we can see at the 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 9 o'clock areas. Now I have this one in inventory at the moment, and I'll link to that in the description below, and you can check that out. But once it sells, I'll also link to various other iterations in the comment below as well. Now reportedly the light blue on this watch comes straight from the 1960s, particularly supposedly from the cars, clothing and interiors used during the time period, in the more stylish resorts in Deauville in northern France's Normandy coast. Or at least that's what the sales pitch is. In any case, the colour is at least interesting. Whether or not it has any historical meaning is another question, but it's at least a little bit different from what you ordinarily see with these watches. So let's dig into the watch. So let's start with the unboxing such as it is. Well, obviously, you've got the outer box, which is card, and that's exactly what you would expect from, well, a watch. Now, within the box, there are two compartments. The first larger one is for the inner box, and the smaller one is for the instruction manual. Now, the inner box itself is relatively standard. It's pleasant enough, but it is an ordinary standard inner box. It is well put together, it is well designed, it looks attractive enough, and it all functions like you would hope. The box is pleasant enough. The instruction manual stands out. The instruction manual comes in this hardback format, and it is very glossy, it's very pretty, it's very nice to use and nice to look at. I suspect no one will actually really refer to the instruction manual, but it's at least well done, and it shows nice attention to detail. The warranty card is at the back of the instruction booklet, or at least at the back of the hard cover. It all sits together very nicely. The instruction manual sitting just below the inner box when you put the whole thing together. The packaging overall is very nice and shows that they're actually putting effort into the design and the sale of their watches. Now let's move on to the watch and the aesthetics. Now the watch itself is 40mm in diameter. It wears comfortably. It isn't too large, it isn't too small, it looks kind of just right. It's a Goldilocks type size. I think it works very well. It feels thin, it feels light, it functions quite nicely. When you're wearing it, it doesn't feel gargantuan, like it's really sitting there as a hunk of metal. Rather, it feels like it's sitting there innocuously. Now the case is brushed stainless steel and it looks pleasant. The finishing is perfectly adequate, particularly for a watch of this level. It feels solid and it feels well put together. It also looks reasonably attractive. The dial is probably the standout for the watch, and it's probably where you distinguish all of the Divers 65 models from one another. Now this particular one has the light blue, grey and yellow colorway. Now you've got the concentric circles of the light blue and the grey, which create a lot of textural integrity. That is, when you've got these two circles, it draws the watch together. And within this outer ring, you have the dial markers. You have the 12, 6 and 9 o'clock markers with the numbers there, which are in an interesting font. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about the font. It's a little bit different at least. I don't recall seeing another watch with this color scheme or with this font, and like I said, it's probably a little bit polarizing, but at least it's different from every other diver's watch that's out there. Now the circles and the design help to bring the watch together. It makes it more cohesive. So rather than just having a grey dial or a blue dial with the markers, it has these two circles, which I think helps to tie it together, particularly when the numbers at the 12, 3, 6, 9 o'clock area, they sit within the ring and kind of draw the whole thing together. It gets a lot more cohesion because of how it's designed. The inner circle helps to also separate the sections, and it also adds to the cohesion. Now the date indicator is at the 6 o'clock area. It's not super legible, but if you're going to have a date on one of these watches, well, you have the question of where exactly do you put it. The hands overall are solid and attractive, although there's probably not a huge amount to say about those. The bezel surrounding the dial is black and shiny. This contrasts with the brushed stainless steel case. It contrasts with the light blue and grey that's on the dial. It appears to be of a different hue than the rest of the watch. The only other thing to report on this case is that the crown is textured. It's easy to use, it's a screw-down crown as you would expect from a diver's watch, and it's signed with the Oris logo. Otherwise, the crown is what you would expect. The only thing to note is it's textured, so it's easy to use. Now in the case back, well, the case back is much more shiny. It's a closed case back with Oris printed upon it. It's certainly pleasant enough, but it's relatively standard. There's nothing particularly unique about the case back, but it works as a case back and it's comfortable enough when it's on your wrist. Now the bracelet is, as I've indicated, brushed stainless steel. The clasp on the bracelet functions much like you would expect, and it has Oris stamped on it. The bracelet I find comfortable. It isn't too heavy, but it doesn't feel flimsy. I think it works perfectly well, but the bracelets on watches of this type all kind of blur together a little bit. It's perfectly functional, it's perfectly nice, but it isn't that different per se. The watch also has decent enough lume so it's visible in the dark. Now filming lume is always relatively difficult, but you can see it in the video here. You can see that it shows up in dark spaces, which makes it a little bit more legible. Overall, in terms of aesthetics, I think the whole watch is well put together. I think it's nice enough, and I think it's a little bit different from most of the divers watches that you see out there. So let's talk about the movement and the functions. Well, the watch features an Oris 733 movement. This is based on the Sellita SW201. Now this is a workhorse movement. It's been modified reportedly for the Oris, however it is not fully in-house. Now like I've said, it's a workhorse movement that is solidly reliable and is easy to service, which is a massive selling point. Now it has 28,800 beats per minute, 26 joules, and it has a date complication. It's a robust movement and is relatively easy to service and to use. However, again, like I've said, it isn't that unique or different in terms of movement, but it is certainly very usable. Now it has water resistance up to 100 meters. However, I suspect that no one is actually going to test that. Now setting the time is very easy. Setting the date is a little bit more fiddly because you need to get the crown into the right location, but it functions exactly like you would expect. You unscrew the crown, then you turn it around, and you can move the date and or the time as need be. It functions like you would expect from a watch. So the movement is robust enough, but like I've said, it's not fully in-house. So what then is my overall verdict on the Oris Divers 65? Well, I actually quite like this particular version, however I don't like all Divers 65s. I think the dial on this really adds to it and makes the watch look more unique. There's good attention to detail in the box and the packaging, which again helps to make it present rather nicely. I like how it's all put together and how it's easy enough to service. Now I personally like this version, but I don't necessarily like all Divers 65s. A lot of it depends on the exact colorway that you get. Now alternatives might include Tag Heuers, for example. So for example, a Tag Heuer Formula 1. That might be an alternative to this type of watch. However, they're often at a slightly higher price point. So they might be a competitor, but just consider what's going to be the best value for money in your price range. But in any case, that's an overview of the Oris Divers 65. I think it's a decent enough watch. This one particularly is for sale. You can check that out using the link in the description below. And when it sells, I'll include links to other versions as well. But do let me know your thoughts about this watch in the comments below. And as I've indicated, contact me if you're interested in buying this one. And hopefully I see you next time as well.